And good morning, and welcome to this virtual bridge. Let's try another pause and try again. Kenji is collecting the bloopers. Good morning, and welcome to this virtual bridge session. Today I'm going to be hosting myself, in fact, as I'm going to be talking about digital experience insights and what can be learnt about the digital experience taking forward from today's situation amongst COVID-19 and lockdown, and lessons that we can learn from the future. I'm going to draw upon the Jisc survey that was done, actually covering last year before the lockdown, but it will allow us an insight into how students might be using the digital platforms and what we can learn from that. So moving on to then the question, and you can note that in the virtual bridge page, you'll find a link to the Jisc Digital Experience Insights information, including about halfway down the page, the virtual page, is a reports section where you can find the various reports. A little bit about what Digital Experience Insights is, first of all. Well, first of all, why do we need another survey? And this is a survey tool. Well, it was recognised as a growing importance of digital as a platform within education. And indeed, it could be that in the not too distant future, that digital will be the main platform for most of learning, independent learning, for many students. And to that end, it's important to have that feedback because digital can be out of sight, whereas we get cues in the physical world, the campus world, about how students are getting on, how they're engaging, and whether they're satisfied with that. That's not something that we necessarily have in the digital world. We have analytics, of course, but still, the digital experience insights is about perception and coming from the student's point of view. The results are relative to the sector. Again, this is a benchmarked survey. There's one thing knowing that you have a score of 80% satisfaction in a particular area, but maybe there's a different slant on it if you know that that's 10% lower than the sector average. The data that is derived from the survey allows more intelligent, data-driven decisions to be taken with regards to investment. And there's one thing to be able to go into a meeting and say that you think or you know some students don't have access to a smartphone. But if you can go in armed with the fact that as a result of the Jisc survey that you know that 1 in 5 students in fact says that they don't have access to a smartphone, then that's a concrete fact and you can make the decisions based on that to allow the most of the digital opportunity in today's and tomorrow's world. The survey is standardised. It allows benchmarking. We do allow institutions to add some of their own questions as well. They are obviously not benchmarked. And there are also different versions for students and also staff. And you'll find on the Jisc page information about the two different sets. There are also variations on the FE survey, the HE survey, the international survey outside the UK, and also the distance learning survey. And I think actually there's interesting lessons to be learned from that. You'll be glad to hear that we produce the information both in a highlights version and in a full report if you're wanting the nitty gritty. So moving on then to what's been learnt from it, and I will point out before I get to there that the surveys have been devised over piloting over a couple of years in working with over 100 institutions, in fact, and over 100,000 students to get them right. That was important, of course, because you can't benchmark if you change from year to year. You can't do the longitudinal study of trend. There's also flexibility in the year as to when the survey is delivered. And again, many of the institutions in Scotland have taken up digital experience insights and have fed into this. So we get a good idea as to what the state of play is. For today, I'm going to concentrate on the further education version and the UK one, indeed, given that most of our viewers thus far have been from further education. However, I think it does pay dividends to have a look at the other versions too yourselves. I will make a few points as we're going before we get into it. First of all, that this survey, the information, is about perception and self-reporting. I know many of the examples. To take one example where students say that they aren't brought up to speed on what digital skills are required of them. where I know that many colleges, in fact all colleges, do that, but the fact is that students are reporting that they're not recognising getting those opportunities. So it's about the perception and self-reporting. It is generalisations and not individual. And again, we had a week or two ago, we had John Casey talking about the edutech world and made the very good point that sometimes you need to know whether gene studying on your motor mechanic course has access to a device. And that's not what this survey is about. It's about understanding the landscape. So there are 4 themes to be tackled, and I'm going to go through each of those 4 themes and try and draw out what I think are the main lessons that can be learned from it. And this is building on the survey that was done, as I say, a year ago, and the results that were released back in the autumn. Theme 1 is the digital lives of our learners and looks to find out, well, on a day-to-day basis, what is the engagement of the student with the digital world and in the context of their education as well. The interesting first fact was that FE learners regularly use digital technologies in their own study time. So that was at 57% using digital tools or apps to make notes or recordings, and half using looking for additional resources using online means. For additional resources not recommended by the lecturer. I think what's interesting about that is the numbers that aren't doing these things. So there's 43% that are not taking notes or doing any sort of recording or record keeping through digital. Now, it could be that they're good with paper and pen, of course, and each should be allowed to their own way. But again, that has to be recognised and taken into account. And we've got about half our FE students that are reporting not using online means to find additional resources. Now, that could be because the pedagogy involves giving the students the material that they need and not requiring additional searching, or it could be because they simply don't know the methods available to them. And so that's maybe something for our library and learning resource colleagues to take up as well as those supporting digital in teaching and learning. Learners in further education have got various access to tools to do their online work. The figure, as I've stated before, is 4 in 5 have access to a smartphone. However, I think again the salient fact is that 1 in 5 do not. About 2/3 have access to a laptop, and about 1/3 have access to a tablet. So we know with those figures then the state of play, and I think there are some strategic questions as to what sort of learning we want to deliver in the future and how, given those figures. Quite simply, this means that there's probably about 20% of our learners that have got very little way of accessing digital content without being given a device, and for many that will be coming into the campus to get access. We can't also assume that even for those 4 in 5 that have, say, smartphones, that they've got unlimited data or access to Wi-Fi. So the ability to watch an hour-long stream of a video may not be a viable option, even if they do have a smartphone. So I think there's a focus on asking which curriculum areas require a device, in fact, and how can we be resilient in making sure that the students have both access to the device and access to the connectivity that allows us to take up the opportunities. Of course, I don't think the answer is, sometimes I jump to it, then we have to go back to paper-based, and we have to go back to the non-digital world. What we need to do is make decisions as to how we present our teaching and learning opportunity, and then work on how we ensure that where digital is the best way forward, we empower or enable the students to have access somehow to those facilities. In the past, of course, recently, it wasn't too difficult. We had lap safes where students could get access to laptops. We had student-provided machines in areas for students to sit down at and connect at the campus. Of course, things have changed, but I think actually there's also an accessibility angle here. We do know, of course, that there are students that aren't able to come into campus as readily as others. And so how do we enable the accessibility of those off campus? And I think there are broad conversations to be had at all levels, up to funder and strategic levels, as to how we provide that. And I know that many institutions have been working on bring your own device and working on bursary support for students having access to laptops, for example, or perhaps tablets. 14% of learners consider assistive technologies to be vital for their learning needs, or say that they choose to use them. I think anecdotally, we would say that most of that 14% are those who consider assistive technologies to be vital. Again, a large number of them have their own device that they can set up, and part of the question certainly will be how our systems are compatible with their devices in order them to take forward. But I think that, of course, probably underreports the number of students who might make good use of assistive technologies if they knew about them, and that's something that we've covered in other sessions, so I won't dwell on them, but it needs to be something embedded in the thinking about digital and obviously the way we offer teaching and learning. So that's something of the landscape that we're working in. The theme too was digital in the institution, and I have to say these were questions mainly around the campus setting, and so I'm going to put those to the side because in the current circumstances that's not particularly pertinent. But one to start off with was the students reported that the top issues in FE for learners were access to computers on campus, access to reliable Wi-Fi, and stable and up-to-date software. Of course, we've amplified those issues by the current situations. And so, and we have to recognise then that many learners were at least for part of the reason coming into campus to get access to digital kit and connectivity. I know that all colleges have been dealing with the question of how to support teachers, to support students and other learners as part of the current situation. But of course, I think we've learnt the lesson of perhaps resilience and working out how we support them going forward beyond the lockdown. Only 53% of learners agree that their college supports them using their own digital devices. So basically half of learners don't agree that they're being supported in using their own digital devices. That could, of course, be because that colleges have decided to focus on provision of devices that are managed, and there are, of course, good benefits to that. But I think the important thing here is for students to be aware of the support they can expect, and also actually specifying at the beginning of courses what's likely to be required of them in terms of connectivity. We know that even in the pre-digital world that some students were lucky enough to be able to afford to buy their own textbooks. Others came into the library and took the textbooks out that were available to them, and others had to sit in the library for want of somewhere else to do their work or through preference and to study there. Again, I think there's not a case for one model here. It's about working out what best suits the variety of learners that we're seeking to reach. Learners reported that on the whole they're not confident that they can access health and wellbeing services online, with an average response of being neutral to that question. So that obviously is exacerbated in the current circumstances where they don't have the choice of physical student support for most people. So, as I'm sure is happening at the moment, then the question is what changes need to be made to student support to raise confidence that students can access health and wellbeing services online. Part of that might be the fact that many of your colleges and institutions are making the services available through different means, but the students aren't aware of the ways in which they can access that. So again, something that has to be revisited, I think. The third theme, digital at course level then. And 70% of lecturers rate the quality of digital teaching and learning on their course as above average. So I think that's well done. That's the fact that in unloaded, non-contextualized question, 70% of the students are willing to say that their quality of digital learning and teaching is above average is great. There is the question as to what they're comparing it to, of course, and why do 30% find it below average? That could be, of course, comparing it to previous study at school or otherwise, or indeed it could be comparing it to their general digital experience socially otherwise. 1/3 of students say they were told what digital skills they would need before their course started. So only 1/3 were confidently and positively saying that they knew which digital skills they would need before their course. I think that's not a number that we would want to keep. We would want to increase that somewhat. In fact, almost a quarter said that they disagreed that they had been told. There were a neutral number in the middle. So we have to be clear as to what digital skills are going to be required for each particular course. Only half of learners saw digital skills as important for their future careers. Now, by my point of view, I might be slightly loaded in my perception of this, but that does seem like a very low percentage to me. And yeah, one can make the point that whatever profession a student is going to head towards, whatever career they see, that whether it be booking holidays or simply engaging with others by way of digital communication, it's going to be very unlikely that anyone escapes the world of digital. 40% of students feel their course prepares them for the digital workplace. So that's 60% that aren't able to say that feel they're being prepared for the digital workplace. There's only 15% who actually disagree that their course prepares them, but still I think that's more than we'd want. So I think the outcome of all of that is that we perhaps need more digital within our, we need more focus on the digital within our curriculums, particularly in students understanding where digital might affect them and in gaining further confidence that they have the skills in order to participate. 29% of learners never work online with others. That it was obviously before the lockdown, but one of the things that we're seeing here is that an awful lot of the teaching and learning that is happening post-lockdown is individual. That it's of course more difficult to set up group work and collaborative work, perhaps in areas in the new lockdown era that we've got ourselves into, unfortunately. So there's a question as to whether teaching and learning, the lecturers can be supported in delivering more collaborative activity in order that the learners take good advantage of this situation to understand the capability of online tools. 40% of learners agree that they have regular opportunities to review and update their digital skills. Now, that of course means 60% of learners are saying that they can't agree that they have regular opportunities to review digital skills. I think the focus has to be on marking the occasions. We do know that across the piece in Scottish further education, in Northern Irish further education and elsewhere, that students are getting those opportunities, but perhaps they're not recognising that that's the case. And finally, theme 4, student attitudes to digital. When students use digital technology as part of their course, there's about a 2/3 majority saying that they feel more independent, they fit learning into their other life more easily, they understand things better, and enjoy learning more. Now, I think there's two things to take from that. Then, first of all, that all those positives are reported by 2/3, so it's not universal. Of course, there are going to be some students that are much more at home at the face-to-face physical, though it could be said that perhaps a greater percentage of students would see the benefits of digital if they were empowered and given the capabilities to make use of digital tools more fully. In terms of digital practices, as to what we're doing in the classroom, and again there's questions as to what we do now in the non-classroom, then we've got about 1/3 of students that say that interactive polls and quizzes are useful to them. So I think what we see is interactivity for about 1/3 of students is something that's important and they would like more of. For others, we could assume that, again, there is greater detail on how many of those simply think there's enough interaction at the moment or would like less indeed. About a quarter would like to see more practice questions online, and about a fifth would like to see more course-related video. We know that quizzes, practice questions and course videos are currently used in many offers in teaching and learning, but obviously there's a significant portion that would like to see more of this being deployed. I'm coming to the end of the 20 minutes, so reflecting on that, I think there's a whole bunch of information contained within the aggregate reports. For those institutions that are using the Jisc Digital Experience Insights themselves, you've got the advantage of being able to compare your institutional results against the benchmarked averages, the aggregates, and working out where you might best put in investment of both cash and in terms of time and effort and consideration. I think there's lessons to be learnt across all four themes here, and in particular, there are some things that tie in with the staff survey as to how to empower staff to best support students in the new digital world. With that, I will draw today's session to a close and invite questions to be passed on. If you haven't already, and if you missed the start piece, then you can go onto Twitter, and if you could use the hashtag #VirtualBridge, Kenji will put questions really to me. We have one through that Kenji is reeling. What has surprised you in the surveys? Anything that stands out? I think coming from the digital world, I have to say, I can get quite easily lulled into the fact that everyone has access in some way to a digital device. And deep down, I know that isn't the case, and we have to be careful as to that. But I think I was surprised that the figure of 80% being the smartphone holding. And I think that's probably a reflection on me and the circles I'm in. But I think we have to be careful as to jumping to those sort of conclusions. I think also it's easy to jump to the conclusion that more digital interaction is going to be for the better. We can't lose sight of the fact that face-to-face contact, and I think all too obvious at the moment, is an important thing for pretty much all students, and especially a portion of students for whom it's key. So we have to work out how to get the best out of the traditional, if you like, the physical world, at the same time as leveraging the best use of digital. The surveys, a second question, sorry, what are the most significant differences between university and college? Very good question. The rate of access to device is higher in higher education than in further education. I think there's a greater confidence as well in higher education around independent learning via digital. A use of a much greater variety of tools is shown in higher education than in further education. And that could be because of the nature of the teaching and learning going on, or it could be because the higher education is managing somehow to give students a greater access to the ways forward themselves and encouraging use of different tools themselves. I think those are probably the most pertinent ones off the top of my head. There are the things in common are about still access to devices, access to bespoke software which can only be delivered on campus, or equipment that can only be delivered on campus, and still access to reliable Wi-Fi. And it's one of the things that again I forget is that the whole world isn't connected, and we all find ourselves in situations without connectivity. For some learners, they're in that, and indeed staff, they're in that situation more often. The third question, the surveys have only been running for a while, but what trends are you seeing? I think actually there's a growth in we've seen in the desire for interaction and collaboration, a slight increase in the number of students that are recognising the importance of digital and getting to grips with the tools that allow them to collaborate and communicate. I think that those would be the ones that I would pick out at the moment. I think actually more telling are the figures that aren't moving. And actually there are quite a lot of these figures that are not changing from year to year. So I think the questions there are about whether changes that we're making now are working, or whether we're going to have to wait time to see if they make a difference. In further education, I think this is particularly key because obviously our learners tend not to be with us for as long. So we have to be able to demonstrate quick changes somehow. Um, Moving on to the next question. In student use of digital, some students have disappeared, not engaging with Teams or Moodle. Any advice for staff? I think that's a very big question, and I think there's two questions. First of all, about the ways in which institutions are recognising that students are disappearing and not engaging. I've had a number of conversations with institutions, and they seem to be on a spectrum between, at some end, only just thinking about how to use analytics to best advantage, whatever analytics are available, to identify those students who have dropped out effectively, and therefore, and then to take action. And other institutions that have been doing well, as well as possible in the circumstances, as identifying that. But I think that's the first point. I think the students having any advice for staff is about, I think all we can do is use our creativity and understanding it. I think there are, again, many reasons why students may have disengaged. It could be that because of communication, they're just not getting the message about ongoing support. But many of the things might also be psychological, and at the moment, many people are obviously finding this situation difficult. And so, starting on building up the support, I think one of the main things is coming from across the sector, and those who are much more capable on the pedagogy and side and support side than I am, is about incremental engagement, throwing a whole load of work at students to do, and having pressure on the students when they're not in an easy position is likely to cause or continue disengagement. If it's merely setting up communication on a social basis, the how are you, and send me an email to let me know that you're getting this sort of type, then we can build on that. I think expecting students to be at a level, and let's face it, we have got quite a capability to deliver very good online teaching and learning for the most part, but to expect the student to move from, in some cases, what was a very predominant in-person support to an online situation just isn't realistic. So I think building up bit by bit is careful. It has to be carefully done. From Andy, are there any significant differences between the views from staff and the views from students? It's not the same survey that they do, of course, but I think they are complementary. I think the main thing that comes out of the staff survey, and is a very important point, is that on the whole, staff currently don't feel sufficiently supported in order to be able to make the most of digital opportunity. On the whole, staff in Scottish further education are lacking confidence in using the tools and systems and understanding where pedagogy might go. I think that is something that, above all else, we need to address. I think if we have confident staff understanding what it is we might do, understanding the steps towards that, then I think that's going to improve the student survey. With that, we've come to the end of the 30 minutes. Can I thank you very much for your engagement? Again, if there are any questions about the Digital Experience Insights survey itself, then your Jisc account manager will be happy to deal with those, especially if you're an institution that's not currently using it. It would be lovely to have a Scotland-wide benchmark. But if you don't know who your account manager is, if you go to the Jisc website, on the front page, somewhere at the bottom, I think you'll find your account manager button. With that, I hope you found some of that useful today. I hope that you'll look at the Digital Experience Insights reports, draw your own conclusions from them and your own highlights and your own points for focus, and I look forward to seeing what the results are of that. Thank you very much. And with that, we've closed the recording. So thank you.